I never thought that taking care of my mother-in-law would change everything I believed about my marriage. For 12 years, I lived with a sense of security, a trust in the man I had loved since college. Mark had always been charming, successful, steady, the kind of person who made you feel like everything was under control. So when he told me he was going on a 3-week fishing trip to Alaska, I didn't question it. "Mom's stable now," he said, his bags already packed. "The nurse comes twice a day. You just need to be here in case of emergencies." He kissed my forehead before leaving, something he'd done since our early days together. But this time it didn't feel comforting. It felt like he was hiding something. Like that kiss was covering up a crack that had just begun to split open. After he drove away in his new SUV, the house felt heavier, quieter, almost like it knew what I didn't. Elaine, his mother, had been battling late-stage cancer for 8 months. She had lived with us for nearly 2 years, and our relationship had always been polite but distant. She was one of those women who smiled without warmth, complimented with an edge, and looked at me like I'd never quite measured up. But that first night after Mark left, something changed. I was organizing her medications when she suddenly grabbed my wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong for someone so ill. Her eyes, usually foggy from painkillers, were clear and focused. "Hannah," she whispered, "I need to show you something before it's too late." First I thought she was confused. Maybe the meds were playing tricks on her again. "Elaine, you need to rest," I said gently. But her eyes sharpened. "No, listen to me. In my room, behind the mirror, the blue envelope. You need to know, he's just like his father." My heart froze. Mark never spoke about his father, and Elaine only mentioned him in vague, careful phrases. The story had always been that he died in a tragic car accident when Mark was 6, a businessman taken too soon. It was something I never questioned. But her tone that night, the urgency in her voice, it planted a fear I couldn't shake. I stayed by her side long after she fell asleep, my mind racing. What could be in that envelope? What did she mean by "just like his father"? I couldn't sleep. I couldn't even bring myself to look behind the mirror. Felt like opening something sacred and dangerous. The next morning, Elaine acted as if the conversation had never happened. She was back to her usual self, quiet, cold, disconnected. But something had changed inside me. The envelope was no longer just a secret. It was a warning. As the days passed, her condition began to decline. The hospice nurse, Jenny, started coming more often. She was kind, gentle, and careful with her words. One afternoon, as Elaine slept, Jenny pulled me aside. "How long have you been managing your household finances?" she asked softly. "Since we got married," I replied, confused. Jenny glanced at Elaine's door, then back at me. "Has Mark ever told you where his business money actually comes from?" I didn't get a chance to answer. Elaine began calling out, and Jenny rushed back in. But that question, it stayed with me like a whisper I couldn't silence. 3 days went by with no call from Mark. He claimed he had bad reception. That wasn't unusual in Alaska, but it added to my growing unease. One night, I lay awake in our bed, listening to the soft buzz of Elaine's oxygen machine from the next room. My eyes fixed on the ceiling, but my thoughts were downstairs, behind that mirror. I knew that looking would change everything. But Elaine's voice haunted me. "He's just like his father." And somewhere deep inside, I knew I had to find out the truth. No matter how painful it might be, morning came with a strange heaviness, like my body knew something my mind was still trying to deny. I went through the motions, preparing Elaine's breakfast, helping her with her medications, waiting for the nurse to arrive. Every second dragged like an hour. When Jenny finally came, I told her I needed to take a quick shower and slipped into Elaine's room instead. The old mirror had been there for as long as I could remember. It was heavy, ornate, the kind of thing you'd expect to see in a Victorian mansion. I pulled it away from the wall with shaking hands. Behind it, the drywall had been cut out to make a small, hidden alcove. And there it was, the blue envelope. My heart pounded as I reached for it. The envelope was thick, its edges worn. I turned at the sound of a noise behind me. Elaine stood in the doorway, leaning on Jenny for support. Her face was pale but her eyes burned with grim satisfaction. "You found it," she said, her voice stronger than it had been in days. Jenny helped her into the armchair and quietly left us alone. I sat on the bed, the envelope heavy in my lap. "I've carried this burden for 30 years, Elaine began. "I thought I could take it to my grave, but seeing Mark, seeing him become what Richard was, I couldn't stay silent." I opened the envelope and pulled out old newspaper clippings, photographs, and several handwritten letters. The first article was yellowed with age, dated 1991. "Local businessman dies in suspicious car accident." Suspicious. That word had never come up in the story I'd been told. The next article made my hands go cold. "Investigation reveals insurance fraud scheme." The more I read, the more my stomach turned. Mark's father hadn't just died in an accident. He'd been running a complex scam, selling fake investment packages to elderly clients and stealing their savings. The crash happened the day before his arrest was scheduled. "There's more," Elaine said, her voice breaking. Among the papers was a letter from a detective, dated 6 months after the crash. It suggested the accident may not have been accidental at all, but the case was never reopened. Photos showed the car wreckage. The angle of the impact didn't sit right. But then came the part one wasn't ready for: a stack of recent bank statements. They looked normal at first glance, but as I studied them, I noticed things that didn't add up. Large deposits, irregular withdrawals, accounts I'd never seen before. And the names. Names of clients that sounded strangely familiar. "He's doing the same thing," Elaine whispered. "Same fraud, same tactics. But this time he's better at hiding it." My breath caught as the pieces started falling into place. The phone calls he took in his office, the vague answers about his clients, the odd gaps in his business ledgers. "There's something else," she said. She pointed to a manila folder at the bottom of the envelope. I pulled it out and opened it slowly. Inside was a medical report, mine, from 3 years ago, back when we were trying to have children. But this one was different. According to it, there had never been anything wrong with me. My fertility was completely normal. I felt the room tilt as I read the words over and over. He'd lied. He made me believe I was the problem. Elaine reached out and took my hand. "He never wanted children," she said. "He knew they'd complicate things. So he made sure you thought you couldn't have them. 12 years. 12 years of marriage, of trust, of shared tears and plans. All built on lies." I remembered the nights I cried in his arms, feeling broken, thinking something was wrong with me. And he knew. He let me suffer, pretended to console me while hiding the truth. The tears came hot and fast, not just from heartbreak but from rage. "Why now?" I asked Elaine, my voice shaking. "Why are you showing me all of this?" "Because I'm dying," she said quietly. "And you deserve to know the truth. But more than that. Because this time the scale is bigger. The money, the victims. He's gonna ruin lives. And if you're not careful, he'll ruin yours too." Just then we heard the front door open. The sound of footsteps. Mark's voice calling out from downstairs. "Hannah." "Mom. I'm home early." Elaine's grip tightened. "Whatever you do," she whispered, "don't let him know what you found. Not yet. Promise me." I barely had time to hide the envelope. My hands shook as I shoved the papers back in, tucked it into the waistband of my pants under my sweater, and slid the mirror back into place. I stepped away just as Mark appeared in the doorway. His skin was tanned from the trip. His smile casual, relaxed. "Hey, beautiful," he said, stepping forward to kiss me. "Miss me?" I forced myself to smile, to let him kiss me, to act like I wasn't seconds away from unraveling. But when I looked into his eyes, something felt different. Something I hadn't noticed before. Behind the charm, the warmth. There was a coldness. Calculation. He moved to Elaine's side, asking about how she was doing. She played her part perfectly. slipping back into her frail, tired act. I watched the two of them interact, and in my head, I was already planning my next move. I needed real proof, something solid enough to bring to the authorities. I had no idea that getting that proof would put me in far more danger than I ever imagined. And that in the weeks to come I would have to make choices that would risk everything. My safety, my sanity, my life. The next few days were a test of everything I had inside me. I slept next to Mark, kissed him, cooked his meals, pretended nothing had changed. But everything had. Every touch made my skin crawl. Every, "I love you" sounded like poison. I started to see things clearly, things I'd missed before. The phone calls he made in hushed tones, the drawer in his office that was always locked, the strange names of clients that never showed up in the books I kept. Elaine became my ally. During her clearer moments, she whispered with me while Mark was at work. "The evidence has to be undeniable," she said one afternoon. "Richard almost got caught once, but the proof wasn't strong enough. That's why he did what he did. That's why he died." I began documenting everything. As Mark's bookkeeper, I had access to the numbers. I copied transactions, jotted down names, noted dates and transfers. But I had to be careful. Too many questions too fast, and he'd know something was off. Then one evening, as I was organizing Elaine's medication, she told me something else. "Check the Peterson file," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Martha Peterson, my friend from church. She gave Mark her entire retirement. He told her it was going into a secure investment." The next day, while Mark was out meeting a client, I went into his office. I found the Peterson file hidden deep in a stack of folders. Inside were two sets of documents. One was polished and professional, an investment summary showing modest returns from a real estate project. The other was raw and disturbing. Transfer slips, offshore routing, and confirmation that $300,000 had been wired to accounts in the Cayman Islands. Martha, a sweet woman in her 70s who always brought cookies to church events, who'd once told me about her grandchildren with so much pride. She had no idea her life savings were gone. And she wasn't the only one. As I dug deeper, I found dozens of similar cases. Teachers, widows, veterans. Mark had targeted the vulnerable, the trusting, just like his father had. The weight of it crushed me. At night, I'd lie in bed next to him and wonder how he could sleep, how he could live with himself. And sometimes he'd look at me with what seemed like genuine love, and I'd doubt everything. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe there was an explanation. But then I'd remember the ledger, the falsified medical report, envelope, the look in his eyes when he didn't know I was watching. One night, as Elaine lay weakly in her bed, she called me close again. "There's something I never told you," she said. "About Richard. The night before the accident, we fought. I told him I knew everything. That I would go to the police." He looked at me with this cold, empty stare. I'd never seen him like that before. And the next morning, they said he'd wrapped his car around a tree. She paused, her breath shaky. The detectives suspected, but they couldn't prove it. And I didn't want to know. Tears welled in her eyes. I thought if I raised Mark differently, if I loved him enough. But I failed. And now he's walking the same path. Maybe worse. I sat in silence, her words washing over me. This wasn't just about exposing a criminal. It was about stopping a legacy. She looked at me and gripped my hand with the last of her strength. "You have to stop him. Not just for them. For him too. Before he becomes something he can never come back from." The next day I made two choices. One, I contacted Claire Martinez, a private investigator Jenny had recommended. And two, I started moving money, small amounts, from our joint accounts into a private one only I could access. Just enough to escape if things went wrong. But I underestimated Mark. He noticed. He always noticed. And one night while I was cooking dinner, I heard him in his office, speaking in a low, cold voice. "Something's off. I need you to follow her. See where she goes. Who she talks to. If she makes one wrong move." The knife slipped from my hand and clattered to the floor. My heart was racing. I wasn't just trying to expose the truth anymore. I was fighting to survive. The next day brought a strange shift. Mark told me he had to leave town again. An emergency meeting in Chicago with investors. "It'll just be 2 days," he said, kissing my forehead like always. "Take care of Mom." I nodded, playing along, but inside I felt both relief and dread. If he was really gone, this might be my only chance to open the safe Elaine had warned me about. But I still needed the combination. Elaine was clearer that morning, the new medication helping her pain. When I brought her breakfast, she motioned me closer. 62391, she whispered. The day he died. My breath caught. Course. Mark's father had died on June 23, 1991. It was a twisted tribute. Mark had used that date as a lock code, a way of honoring the man he'd never truly known. I waited until the nurse left before making my move. The Remington print in Mark's office, the one Elaine had pointed out, swung away easily to reveal the safe. My fingers shook as I entered the numbers. 6-2-3-9-1. The lock clicked. The door swung open. Inside were stacks of documents, several USB drives, and multiple passports, all with Mark's photo but different names. But what drew my eye was a thick leather-bound ledger. Opened it. What I saw chilled me to my core. It was a complete record, not just of the current fraud but of everything. Years of transactions. Notes in the margins detailing each victim, their fears, their weaknesses, how to gain their trust, how to manipulate them. It was more than a business to him. It was a system, strategy, game. I turned to the last page and froze. There, in Mark's precise handwriting, was a list labeled contingencies. My name was there, along with notes about my liability, potential exposure, and containment options. He had thought about what to do with me. Coldly, practically, like a risk, not a wife. I barely had time to process the horror when I heard the front door open. My blood ran cold. Mark. I just closed the safe and swung the painting back into place when I heard his footsteps on the stairs. I rushed to Elaine's room, sat beside her, and adjusted her pillows with shaking hands. Seconds later, Mark appeared in the doorway. "Hey," he said, sounding too casual. "Forgot something for Chicago." He smiled, but his eyes scanned the room. "Thought you'd be halfway there by now," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yeah," he replied slowly. "Flight got delayed." He studied me. "You look a little flushed." "Just tired," I said, gesturing toward Elaine, who was pretending to sleep. He nodded but didn't look convinced. "Well, I'll grab what I need and head out again. Try to get some rest, honey." He kissed my head again. I held my breath until I heard his car pull out of the driveway. Elaine opened her eyes the second he was gone. "You found it," she whispered. He nodded. Now she knew I understood. Everything. "He's prepared to hurt you," she said softly. "You're not safe anymore." And she was right. That night, Elaine's breathing worsened. A violent coughing fit shook her frail frame. I rushed to her side, turned up the oxygen, and called 911. As the ambulance drove off, lights flashing, I called Mark. Straight to voicemail. That was unusual. Even in the Alaskan wilderness, he found a way to check in. Something was wrong. At the hospital, Elaine was moved to the ICU. The doctor spoke gently, telling me it was time to prepare for the end. I sat by her bedside, holding her hand, watching the monitors track her fading heart. My phone buzzed. A message from Claire. *urgent. We need to meet. Bank accounts show major activity. He's moving money fast. I hesitated. I didn't want to leave Elaine. But as if sensing my worry, she opened her eyes. "Go," she whispered. "Do what needs to be done. I'll hold on." I kissed her forehead and left. The hospital parking lot felt eerily quiet. In Lisa's borrowed car, I met Claire 2 towns over. She slid a manila envelope across the table. "Your instincts were right." He's running a full Ponzi scheme. New investments cover returns to old ones. He's been skimming millions. I flipped through the documents. The scale was beyond anything I'd imagined. There's more, Claire said, lowering her voice. He's connected to dangerous people. The kind who help criminals hide money and silence problems. I looked at her. What do I do? Keep collecting proof. But Hannah, she leaned in. Think about getting out. This is bigger than just fraud. If he finds out what you're doing. Back home I found Elaine in distress again. As I helped her sit up, she gripped my hand. The safe, not that one, another. She gasped for breath. Blue envelope, bottom right corner. Hidden compartment. I stayed with her until she was stable, then rushed home. The house was quiet. I returned to the envelope, ran my fingers along the edges until I found a ridge. I peeled it back carefully and found a small key and a note. Storage Unit 23. City Storage on Maple, Richard's Insurance. Richard, Mark's father. Elaine had kept something else. Proof from the past. And now she had passed it on to me with the key clutched tightly in my hand. I grabbed the emergency bag I had packed weeks ago, the one I kept hidden in the back of my closet just in case, and headed straight to City Storage on Maple. As I drove, I called Jenny. Can you stay with Elaine? I asked, my voice shaking. I don't want her alone. Of course, she said without hesitation. But Hannah, be careful. Mark called the hospital earlier, asking about his mother. He seemed different. Cold. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. I didn't respond. There was no comfort left in words now. The storage facility was quiet, the kind of eerie silence that made every sound echo louder than it should. Unit 23 was in the far corner, tucked away from the cameras. The key slid in smoothly, and the door creaked open to reveal boxes stacked high under a dusty tarp. I pulled it back and started digging. Old documents, bank statements, letters, photographs. But in the corner sat a small metal lockbox. Inside were photos I'd never seen before. Mark's father with men I recognized from Claire's investigation. Men connected to Mark's current scheme. The same faces. The same organization. 20 years later. Then I found the letter. A confession written in Richard's hand, just before he died. It wasn't a suicide note. It was a detailed account of his crimes. Names, amounts, threats. He had written it for leverage. As insurance. But Elaine had kept it, never using it. Until now. My phone buzzed. A message from Jenny. Asterisk, Mark just arrived at the hospital. Asked about you. Something's wrong. He's making the staff nervous. Asterisk. Panic gripped me. I snapped photos of the letter and documents, shoved the most important ones into my bag, and locked the unit again. But just as I stepped into the alley beside the row of storage units, a car engine started. I ducked behind a wall and peeked. A black SUV drove slowly past, the windows tinted. They were looking for me. My phone buzzed again. Get somewhere safe. Bolted. I drove without stopping, taking turns I didn't need to take, using every trick Claire had taught me to lose a tail. Finally, when I was sure I wasn't being followed, I went to the one place I knew Mark would never look, the women's shelter where I'd been volunteering for years. Lisa, the director, took one look at my face and pulled me into her office. I showed her the files, the pictures, the confession. Her expression grew darker with every page. You need to go to the FBI, she said. This is way beyond anything local police can handle. I will, I said, my voice cracking. But first, have to go back. Elaine's dying. She asked for me. Lisa gripped my hand. That's exactly what he's counting on. He knows you'll come back. It's not safe. Then my phone rang. The hospital. Doctor. It's your mother-in-law. She's asking for you. I don't think she has much time. Tears welled in my eyes. I looked at Lisa. She didn't stop me. She just handed me her car keys. Take my car. I'll call in protection. You won't be alone. The drive to the hospital felt like walking into a fire. I knew Mark would be waiting. I knew he was watching. But I also knew I couldn't let Elaine die alone. In the hospital parking garage, I parked on the 3rd level, away from the entrance. Before I stepped out, I forwarded all the evidence to the secure email addresses Claire had set up. If something happened to me, the truth would still survive. Jenny's message came in. Asterisk, he's here. 4th floor. Waiting room. 2 men with him. I don't recognize them. Asterisk. I took the service elevator to the 5th floor, then walked down the back stairs to the 4th. Every step was a risk. Every corner could be a trap. I reached the nurse's station and spotted Jenny. She rushed over, her face tense. Those men, Mark's with them. They've been watching the floor. Not threatening, but they're making everyone nervous. I showed her the notarized medical proxy Elaine had signed 3 weeks ago. She made me her decision maker. She knew this might happen. Jenny scanned the document, nodded, and stood tall. I'll handle the paperwork. Oh, I'll make sure no one interrupts. Elaine looked so small in the bed. Ill. Fading. But when her eyes opened and found mine, she smiled weakly. You came back, she whispered. Of course I did. I held her hand, trying to keep my voice steady. I found it. The storage unit. Photos. The confession. It's safe now. She squeezed my hand, her strength almost gone. There's something else, she murmured. Something I never told anyone. She gestured for me to lean closer. That night. Richard. He didn't drive off that road alone. His partners came. They threatened to kill me. To kill Mark. He went with them. Followed. I saw it all. Froze. They made it look like a suicide. That's why I kept the evidence. I knew. If Mark ever got involved with them. The monitor began to beep, louder, more frantic. Promise me, she gasped, her lips trembling. Promise me you'll stop him. Save him. I promise, I whispered, tears falling down my cheeks. Suddenly, voices echoed in the hall. Mark's voice. Angry. Demanding. A nurse peeked in nervously. Your husband is insisting on seeing his mother. Elaine's eyes widened in panic. Tell him, she struggled for breath. Tell him. I know about the black car. I forgive his father. And I forgive him too. The machine screamed. Staff rushed in. I was gently pulled aside. In the chaos I heard Mark outside shouting. That's my mother. You can't keep me out. I had seconds to decide. Stay and risk everything or escape before Mark caught me. Elaine's hand grew cold in mine. I leaned in, kissed her forehead one last time and whispered, I'll make it right. I swear. Then I slipped into the private bathroom just as Mark burst through the door, from the narrow gap of the bathroom door. I watched him rush to her side. Mark's shoulders shook, his voice breaking as he called her name. For a brief moment it almost felt real, the grief, the pain. The man I had loved for 12 years seemed to be mourning his mother. But then I saw it, the glance he exchanged with one of the men standing at the door. Quick, sharp, calculating. They weren't there to say goodbye. They were there to make sure Elaine didn't say anything else. I'd like a moment alone with my mother, Mark said to the medical staff. His voice was thick with tears, but his tone had shifted, controlled, measured. One by one, the doctors and nurses filed out of the room. The 2 men stayed. I pressed myself against the cold wall of the bathroom, heart pounding so loudly I thought they might hear it. Check the room, Mark ordered suddenly. She was here. The nurse said she was just here. I glanced around, desperate. The window was too small to escape through. The only way out was through the door, right into them. And then I saw it. The red emergency cord hanging beside the sink. Jenny had once told me about it during a night shift chat. Every ICU bathroom had one. Pull it and security comes immediately, no questions asked. The doorknob began to turn. I yanked the cord. Alarms exploded through the hospital floor. Loud, piercing, immediate. I heard voices shouting in the hallway, running footsteps. The bathroom door slammed shut again. What the hell? One of the men growled. Security's coming, the other warned. We need to move. Find her, Mark snapped. She has to be here. Search the whole damn floor. A new voice cut through their panic. Calm, commanding. Sir, I'm with hospital security. Everyone needs to evacuate this floor immediately. This is my mother's room. Mark protested, his voice rising in anger. This is a code blue. No exceptions, the security officer said firmly. More footsteps, more voices, protests, then silence. I counted 5 full minutes, every second dragging like a lifetime. Finally, I opened the door just enough to peek out. The room was empty. Elaine lay still, her chest no longer rising, monitors flatlined. I moved to her side and took her cold hand in mine. Thank you, I whispered. For trusting me. For saving me. Then I pulled out my phone and made the most important call of my life. Claire, I said, keeping my voice low. It's time. Send everything to the FBI. I need an exit route. Now. She didn't hesitate. Already done. Jenny called me. There's a service elevator down the hall past the supply room. Head to the basement, go out the loading dock. I'll have someone waiting. I slipped out of the room, walking quickly but calmly past the nurse's station. The floor was still in disarray. Staff were distracted by the false alarm. The timing was perfect. I found the service elevator just where Claire had said. As I stepped inside and pressed the button for the basement, I heard fast footsteps behind me. Stop! But the doors were already closing. The basement was cold, dim, almost industrial. I followed the exit signs, my steps echoing in the concrete hallway. Every flickering light made my nerves jump. Every shadow looked like a trap. Then a voice called out. Hey! I turned, ready to run. Hannah, wait, it's me. Jenny. She jogged toward me from a side hallway, her face flushed, out of breath. This way, she said urgently. Quick! She led me through a maze of storage rooms, past janitor closets and maintenance equipment, until she pushed open a heavy door. Outside, at the loading dock, a hospital supply truck idled. A woman I recognized from the shelter was behind the wheel, waving us over. Get in, Jenny said. Lisa arranged it. You'll look like just another delivery. I turned to her, overwhelmed. Thank you, I whispered. Go, she urged. The FBI is on their way. Mark won't be able to hide anymore. As the truck rolled out of the dock, I finally exhaled. In my bag was everything. The ledger, Richard's letter, the photos, the storage unit keys, the recordings. Claire had already forwarded digital copies to the FBI's secure inbox. I looked down at my phone. A new message buzzed in. I hear you have quite a story to tell. Special Agent Roberts, FBI. I looked out the window as the hospital disappeared behind us. Somewhere inside, Mark was discovering the world he'd built was collapsing around him, just like his father's had. But this time, it wouldn't end in silence. Not for Elaine. Not for me. The truck rumbled along the highway as the sky darkened, the city lights fading into the distance. I sat in the back, surrounded by boxes of medical supplies, clutching my bag like it held my heartbeat. My fingers grazed the edge of the blue envelope, now soft from handling, worn but still whole. Elaine's final gift. Her courage wrapped in paper. When we arrived at the FBI field office, it looked nothing like I expected. No sleek glass walls or dark suits. Just a plain government building with flickering lights and worn floors. But for the first time in months I felt safe. In the interview room, Agent Roberts and her team spread out the documents I had collected. They flipped through pages of bank records, examined Richard's confession, and studied the ledger with silent intensity. No one spoke for a long time. The evidence you've provided is substantial, Agent Roberts finally said. But what makes this case significant is the pattern. Your husband didn't just continue his father's fraud. He expanded it. He turned it into a network. And the same names, the same criminal connections, they're back. I nodded slowly, then reached for my phone. There's something else, I said, my voice steady now. I pulled up the recording I'd made in Elaine's hospital room. Her final confession about what really happened to Richard. The threats. The men in the black car. How she followed. How she saw them force him to drive to his death. As the recording played, the agents leaned in. When it ended, they sat back, exchanging grave looks. "This changes everything," Robert said. "We can reopen the Richard Wilson case. And with the documentation you've gathered on Mark's current operation, we'll be able to bring the entire organization down." She looked at me directly. "But we'll need to place you in protective custody. You're a high-value witness now, and a target." The next 48 hours passed in a blur. I was relocated to a safe house. The FBI executed simultaneous raids on Mark's office, our home, and multiple shell companies. Claire's investigation had given them a roadmap, and they followed it with precision. Jenny kept me updated through secure messages. Mark had been arrested at a private airfield trying to board a jet to the Cayman Islands. His 2 associates were caught at the Canadian border. The organization was unraveling. But the true shock came when forensic accountants reviewed the full scope of Mark's books. Over $50 million in stolen funds. Hundreds of victims. Most of them elderly or vulnerable. The detail in Mark's ledger, once his strength, became the noose around his neck. 6 days after Elaine passed, I was called back to the FBI office for a final interview. This time, I was surprised to find Mark sitting across from me. In an orange jumpsuit. No watch, no suit, no charm. Just a tired man who looked smaller than I remembered. "My lawyer says you agreed to see me," he said quietly. He nodded. "Why?" He stared at his hands. "I thought I could do it better than him. Better than Dad. He was careless. I was smarter." He gave a hollow laugh. "Turns out Mom was smarter than both of us." "She tried to save you," I said, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Even at the end, she was trying. He looked up at me. For the first time in years, I saw something real in his eyes, regret. "She told you, didn't she?" he asked. "About that night. About what really happened to my dad." He nodded. "I always wondered," he whispered. "I used to hear her crying at night. I thought it was grief. But it was guilt too, wasn't it? She carried it for decades," I said. "To protect you." He swallowed. "I didn't mean to become this. Started small. Then Dad's old friends showed up. They said I owed them. That I had to finish what he started." "You had choices, Mark," I said. "Every step of the way. You chose this." He nodded, slow and heavy. "I know. They're offering a deal if I testify. They say I can help take them down." "You should," I said. "Not for a lighter sentence, for your mother. She believed there was still good in you." He hesitated, then reached into his folder and pulled out a piece of paper. "She wrote me a letter. The FBI gave it to me yesterday. She said she forgave me." His voice broke. "After everything, she still forgave me." "That's what mothers do," I said softly. "The question is, what will you do with that forgiveness?" When I left the room, Agent Roberts was waiting. "He's ready to cooperate," I told her. She nodded. "We also found something in his records. Something you might want to know." I braced myself. "About your fertility test. There was medical fraud. We can add it to the charges. But the results Elaine showed you were real. You can still try if you want." I smiled, faint but real. "Maybe. But right now I need to focus on the people he hurt. Starting with Martha Peterson." Agent Roberts returned my smile. "Actually, you'll want to hear this. Turns out, Mark invested part of Martha's funds into a real property. It actually made a profit." A laugh bubbled up inside me. The first genuine one in a long time. Some good came out of it after all. And for the first time I started to believe it. 1 year later, I stood in front of Elaine's grave, a bouquet of fresh flowers in my hands. The crisp autumn wind brushed past, rustling the leaves, carrying the scent of earth and fading roses. A lot had changed in 12 months. It still surprised me how much could happen in the space between one heartbeat and the next. How one decision, one truth, could reshape everything you thought was permanent. Mark had pleaded guilty to all charges. His full confession, paired with the evidence I'd given to the FBI, helped dismantle the entire organization. Dozens were arrested across 3 states. The money trail had gone deep, but Mark's obsession with detail, his careful records, ended up doing the most damage to his case. Ironically, the thing that once made him powerful was what ultimately made him powerless. Thanks to those same records, most of the victims recovered a large portion of what they lost. Martha Peterson had been one of the first to receive restitution. She didn't just take the money and walk away. She used her portion to start a foundation supporting elderly victims of financial abuse. She named it the Wilson Fund, not for Mark but for Elaine. "Your mother-in-law was a force," she told me over dinner one evening. Even in silence, she was always trying to protect. Martha had insisted I join the board. Said I understood better than anyone what it meant to be deceived, and what it took to heal. We'd become close friends. Our weekly dinners became a kind of ritual. Safe space, shared memories, and long talks about everything we'd lost, and what we'd gained back. The criminal trials had made national headlines for weeks. I testified under oath not just about Mark's crimes, but about Elaine's final confession, the night Richard Wilson was murdered, and the web of corruption that followed. One by one, Mark's former partners turned on each other, cutting deals in desperate attempts to save themselves. None succeeded. Justice had finally come. For the victims. For Richard. And for Elaine. I visited Mark only once after his sentencing. He looked older. Hello. But there was something else too, a kind of peace. He told me he'd started therapy in prison, trying to untangle the choices that had led him here. "I found Dad's old journals," he said. "From before everything. He wasn't always like that. He changed. And I think I did too." "She never gave up on you," I told him. "Even at the end." "I know," he said quietly. "That's what I think about every day now. I don't deserve it, but I want to be better. For her." Now, standing at Elaine's grave, I thought about everything she'd carried. Secrets, guilt, love, fear. And still, even with all that weight, she'd found the strength to speak the truth when it mattered most. Jenny appeared beside me, her arms full of flowers. We'd stayed close, bonded by everything we'd been through. She had become not only a trusted friend but also my partner in something much bigger. "The new support group starts next week," she reminded me. 10 women. All survivors of financial abuse. "They're excited to meet you." I nodded, laying my bouquet down carefully. "We'll help them," I said. "We'll show them the signs I missed. The signs so many women miss." The shelter had expanded its services, launching a program in Elaine's name. The Elaine Wilson Center for Financial Empowerment would open its doors next month, offering counseling, legal aid, and financial literacy programs for women in abusive financial situations. Funded partly by recovered assets from Mark's case and partly by donations from survivors and their families, it was more than a building. It was a new beginning. "Did you hear?" Jenny asked. "The lawsuit went through. The victims won. The banks are going to have to change their policies. More safeguards. More protections." Elaine would have been proud. Real change. Lasting, meaningful change. Born out of her courage. "Just a minute," I said, reaching into my bag. I pulled out the blue envelope. It was empty now, at least of the secrets it once held. But inside was a letter I had written, a final message to Elaine, telling her everything that had happened. About Mark's confession. The center. Martha. The lives that had been changed because she chose truth over silence. I tucked the envelope beneath the flowers, pressed my hand to the headstone and whispered, "Thank you. For saving me. For saving him. For saving so many more." As Jenny and I turned to leave, my phone buzzed. Quiet alert from my calendar. Fertility clinic. Tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. At 40, I had decided it was time to reclaim that part of my life too. Maybe it would work. Maybe it wouldn't. But either way, it would be on my terms, not stolen from me by lies. As we walked back to the car, the clouds parted and sunlight spilled through, casting long shadows across the cemetery lawn. Life would never be what it was before. But maybe that was the point. Sometimes it takes losing everything you thought you wanted to find out who you were meant to become. Elaine's final words had been about forgiveness. But her true gift was something even greater. Truth. And with that truth came the power to rebuild, to help others, and to shine a light where there had once been only secrets. The new center's logo featured a mirror, a quiet symbol of where it all began. But unlike the one that had hidden Elaine's truth, this mirror reflected something far more powerful: strength, worth, hope, and the belief that even the darkest secrets can become the light that leads us forward.